From the High Mountain Studios here in the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the WMMA Math Podcast, brought to you by WombatSports.com. I am Mark the Q. I am your host. Later we'll be talking to Linda Mihalec and Shino VanHoose, who will both be fighting on the next Invicta card. We'll have more about that in just a bit. But let's go ahead and get into some news. Our top story of the night, it involves the Legacy Fighting Alliance, one of our more well-known minor promotions out there, and their exit out of Access TV. Access TV has now pulled their focus more towards the pro wrestling angle, having signed several deals with several different promotions in that arena. LFA is the probably the last card of MMA that Access TV will see, maybe ever. They've been slowly but surely cutting out their programming. Lion Fights was a part of their programming, and several other CES was also covered under the Access banner as well. CES, I think, is now under the Fight Pass promotion, and a lot of us are speculating that, once LFA finishes up their work over at Access TV, they may follow suit and head towards the UFC Fight Pass. So we'll have to see what goes on there. LFA still an active organization, so we have no doubt they'll find another home. So sad to see that Access TV is getting rid of MMA, but things get a little bit better, and we can see LFA elsewhere. So going on to Bellator news, a couple of fight announcements. Kerry Melendez will be back in action against Mandy Poke October the 4th. And a couple of familiar names will be taking the Bellator cage for the first time on October 25th. Beck Rawlings, who you may remember from the UFC and Invicta, and she's a current bare-knuckle boxing champion, will be taking Irana Joanna. She'll be fighting at flyweight for Bellator. And Jessie Mealy will be facing Tatiana Gogera. Mealy, a featherweight, really good talent as well. Also on November 14th, Olga Rubin will be taking on Sinead Kavanagh. So those are all the fights Bellator was announced this week. Now let's take a look at what's going on over at Combate Americas. Melissa Cervantes, also known as Thunder Rosa, has signed to Combates. She's a very excellent professional wrestler and luchadora. This is the second luchadora to have signed to Combates, with Dolce Sexy Star Garcia having won her debut a few months back. Rosa has had a really good fight this past weekend, a really good match over on WOW Women of Wrestling over on Access TV against Tessa Blanchard, which is really, really good. If guys do have an opportunity to watch that match, it's really, really good. But Melissa will be making her debut on November 8th, so look out for that as well. And now on to UFC news. There was one fight that was announced this week for the Singapore card on October 26th. Ashley Yoder will be facing Yan Yonan. This, of course, joins Alexandra Albu and Loma Lubukmi on the card. The UFC invades Mexico City this weekend with 4 female bouts on the docket. The co-main event of the card features former champion Carla Esparza taking on Alexa Grasso. Also on the main card, Irene Aldana will face Vanessa Mello. And 2 bouts will round out the preliminary card as Ariane Carnelosi will face Angela Hill, and Sinjara Eubanks will be at 135 against Betch Koheha. All those fights will be on ESPN+. And this brings us to Invicta news, which there's quite a lot of it this week. We'll start with some of the signings that happened this past week. Among them, Cynthia Arceo, Serena De Jesus, Hope Chase, and Phoenix Series vet Maiju Satoma, who has signed a multi-fight deal. The full card has been announced for Invicta's October 4th card, which will emanate from Kansas City again. The main event, of course, is Jinyu Fry versus Ashley Cummins, a rematch for the Atomweight Championship. The co-main event is Pearl Gonzalez facing Rogawagan Chanchez at flyweight. The featured match will be Maria Akropova versus Morella Santos. Kay Hansen will be making a quick turnaround versus Nicole Calari. And the flyweight Jordan Hayes will face Claire Johnson in the opening bout. Two atomweight bouts round out the card, with Linda Mihalec facing Marissa Messer-Belinche, and the second Shino VanHoose versus Lindsay Van Zandt. Now, we happen to have an interview with two of the competitors in those last two bouts. Linda Mihalec actually has a couple of teammates that are Invicta Fights vets, including Gina Begley, who will be in her corner coming up on October the 4th. She has a very interesting story in terms of how she got into the sport and a little bit about her preparation. So here's our interview with Linda Mihalec. We are here with InvictaFC debutante and really talented atomweight Linda Mihalec is on with us right now. How you doing, Linda?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's the training camp been going?
Training camp's been going great, actually. I've been getting in some good, hard workouts. I just got done training with Gina Gooden, actually, who made her Invicta debut just a couple months ago back in May. She's here in Kentucky, so I get to work with her, so that's an outstanding opportunity. So I've got good training partners, and I'm feeling really good coming up into this fight.
Well, first question is, what was it like getting that call from Invicta to be able to sign with them?
Of course, it's exciting. As a woman, getting the call from Invicta, they're the biggest women's promotion. They're one of the top promotions in the world, and they've got some of the top 105ers in the world. So I'm very excited to get my foot in the door and start working my way up in their 105 division.
Well, quite a few Ginas that have actually made their way up to Invicta at one point or another. How have they given you any advice or any kind of expectations to look forward to in your debut?
I'm just working as hard as I can to make sure that I make this a great debut. As long as I work hard, everything should go according to plan.
Yeah, I mean, just to have that those two that have had experience up there at a major card. I mean, how's it for you to kind of just have that experience under your belt? Have you ever been to an Invicta card? Have you ever had that experience of
I personally have never been to an Invicta card, but it is definitely nice having like Gina Elliott from my gym has brought me up from the very beginning when I first stepped into the gym. She's helped me throughout my amateur career, and she's also an Invicta vet. So coming into this fight, I've got several Invicta vets that can help me coming up, and it's really wonderful, despite my lack of experience with them, having other people that can kind of help me out.
Well, let's start from the beginning. What got you into fighting?
Actually, I am a runner. I love running, marathon running, triathlon is my passion. And I thought, I really need to get into some cross training for my knees and my ankles. I thought I want to get in some more lateral movement. Running is just so linear, and us runners, we're lucky if we'll spend 15 minutes after a run stretching, let alone doing drills for lateral movement. So I thought, my husband used to box. Maybe I'll get into some boxing or something with him, and that will be something fun to do. And at the time, it was very hard to find a boxing gym, so we found an MMA gym together, and he actually kind of casually got into it here and there, but I fell in love with jiu-jitsu, and I started doing it, and then of course, I'm a little bit competitive in nature. I just want to see how I'm doing, so I started getting into jiu-jitsu competitions and absolutely loving that. And Gina was kind of like, do you know what, Linda, why don't you try an MMA fight? I was also had transitioned into Muay Thai, and just because I love a challenge, and it was another class at the gym, and so I ended up taking my first MMA fight, and I've just kept falling in love with the sport and the challenge of the sport. It's not only a physically challenging sport, but it's a mentally challenging sport. It's a constant puzzle. It's not it's sometimes more physically dominant fighter, it's sometimes the smarter fighter that wins. It's just a very interesting sport to me. So I started as just a marathon runner looking to cross-train, and now I've become a professional fighter, and my running is kind of gone on the side.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a little bit different in terms of physicality, in terms of what MMA brings versus what running brings as well. I mean, in your opinion, I mean, what things did running bring into the sport for you, and what other kind of challenges that kind of motivated you, or kind of challenged you a little bit more when it came from coming from a running sport to a fighting sport?
I think that running, as an endurance athlete, you're already mentally prepared for those physically hard, grueling workouts. When you go into the gym and you can't push anymore and you have to push further. That marathon training, just that mental edge to push further, it does help you further prepare. However, you learn from distance running is totally different than MMA fighting, as far as MMA fighting is a whole body workout. So I learned very quickly that just because I'm a good marathon runner and my cardio is good in that aspect, doesn't mean that my cardio is good for a 3-round fight. I have to train much differently for my fights than I do for a marathon. So that's actually interesting. People always think, oh, you're a marathon runner, you must have amazing cardio. No, I have amazing cardio because my coach puts me through circuit training and hard sparring rounds. I don't have good cardio from marathon running.
Yeah, I mean,
fight cardio.
Yeah, that is a big misconception in terms of that, because I mean you're obviously using a lot more muscles, doing fighting than doing running. So I mean it is kind of interesting, which brings me to another question. Your last fight was a professional fight, and you went the full distance 15 minutes versus an amateur fight where you only go 9 minutes, at the most. How was it for you to have faced your first 5-round fight?
I actually felt pretty comfortable with my cardio in that fight. I always feel like every fight's a little bit different. You find weaknesses, strengths. I had, with that particular fight, my opponent had really good pressure on me, and I found I had a really hard time getting my back off the cage, and all I could do was strike from my position the best I could, and I think that's how I ended up winning the fight, and was getting in my strikes. And that's pretty much, I feel like, what my fighting style has always been. Is a lot of times I take harder fights and I end up having a gritty, tough fight, and I end up having to find a way to win the fight. Maybe I'm not having a dominant performance, but I've found a way to win that fight.
Now, like I said, it's great to have that experience under you coming into a big event like Invicta. I mean, being an atomweight, we're starting to see the division grow a little bit. How was it for you as an amateur to find fights? And kind of tell me a little bit about your kind of thoughts about where the division is heading. Once because you're obviously a part of the division, but how do you see the division heading in the future?
I actually think the division is growing very quickly. I remember in 2016, I actually started, and my first fight was at 110. We weren't sure if I was going to be a strawweight or an atomweight. I was actually very small. I was, when you're amateur, you're not, you can, a lot of amateurs fight at their walking around weight. I was walking around at between 113 and 115 or so. So I thought maybe I would be a strawweight, was what my thought was. And so I took a fight at 110. It was super easy for me to make weight. I didn't cut any weight, didn't worry about it or anything. And I thought my next fight would be at strawweight, and that's what I was going to fight. And then my coach said, you know,